I'll look to keep this intro brief, but in this video I will be showing my favourite tactic for two styles of play which I think are underused in Football Manager. These are going to be the Route 1 style and the Control Possession style. So starting off with Pep's Man City, we have a 4-3-3 of course. Pep is most famous for his tiki-taka systems at Barcelona and for his possession-based style at Manchester City, so we'll be using his squad as an example for this tactic. To be clear, in this video I'm not trying to replicate his manager's tactics, I'm just using their squad to show off some of my favourite tactics. For this tactic we'll start with the team instructions. So the attacking width is wide, which as you can see here, it says it instructs the team to stretch to play even wider and use the full extremes of the pitch to their advantage. So it's just going to mean that your wingers go all the way to the touchline and your team uses all the available space, which is exactly what you want to do when you're trying to keep the ball. Obviously we're going to play out of defence, we're not going to focus any specific areas, we're not going to try and pass into space because, you know, less likely to keep the ball if you're hitting it into a space rather than actually to their feet. We're going for the shortest passing options, which as you can see it says, oh well, it's gone away. This places an increased emphasis on instructing players to prioritise keeping hold of the ball. You could have it on shorter. It's probably better in terms of the FM match engine to have it on shorter, but just for realistic purposes, I like it being on much shorter. The tempo, I have it on slightly lower. You can have it on higher, and you will still keep the ball. It just introduces more opportunity for error. Whereas I like slower because it's a more patient build up. You could even have this on lower, but I think if you do that, then you're never going to end up scoring. Every game's going to be 0-0 with like 80% possession. I like dribble less because it kind of defeats the point. If you've kept the ball for like a minute, then as soon as you pass to a forward player, they try a risky take on and lose it. And I have work ball into box songs again. No point keeping the ball and then hitting a useless cross from 30 yards away from the box with a tactic like this. In transition, we're going to counter press to win the ball back immediately so we can keep control of the game. We're not going to counter attack because again that will play the ball in front and it will make us rush things and potentially probably lose the ball. We're not going to distribute quickly or slow it down. The goalkeeper can just do what he likes, especially when you've got someone like Edison. And we're not telling him to go anywhere in specific. Again, more for realism purposes. If you actually want it to be good in game, you probably want him to take short kicks, because then he can still go into the midfield and to the wings, but he's not just going to decide that he wants to lump it over the top like 10 times a game. And out of possession, very basic stuff: high press, high line, maximum trigger press, and preventing the goalkeeper from disputing it to try and win the ball back. You can have step up more, personal preference. You can get stuck in, personal preference. Again, like get stuck in is brilliant for the FM match engine, but it's a bit gamey, so I don't tend to use it. Moving on to the player roles, they're all quite understandable to be honest when you consider what we're trying to achieve, but we'll start from the goalkeeper, sweeper keeper on attack, if you've got the player to do it. It's one of my biggest annoyances when you get people who concede goals because their goal from just going back to the goalkeeper all the time when they've got someone that cannot do it. Like if you're managing Real Madrid and you've got flipping Courtois in net, you should not be going back to someone with 13 passing and 10 first touch all the time. You should not have someone like this on sweeper keeper on attack. But if you've got a player that can do it, it's very nice to have because they will come out and close the ball down more and they will take a more active role in build-up, which is exactly what you want for a team that's kind of sole focus is keeping the ball, at least in the defensive third. When you've got the ball here, just keep it, it's the whole goal. Two centre-backs on ball-playing defender and stay wider. I mean, what else did you expect? Again, if you've got awful centre-backs that can't pass the ball, you shouldn't be playing this kind of tactic anyway, so you should have centre-backs that can be ball players. Again, it's best to have the stronger foot on each side, but so long as it's not like weak, like if this is yellow colour, which is fairly strong, which I think, if you have a look at the editor, yeah, it's 12 or greater for this yellow colour on the weak foot, 12 out of 20 that is. I tend to, if it's lower than that, which there will be one, I think Ake maybe, yeah, Ake, I wouldn't play Ake as a stay wider on his right foot. I just wouldn't do that personally. I think you'll lose the ball too often. As long as it's yellow, then that's fine. Obviously you want to have the preferred foot on the correct side if possible. both wing backs, or full backs should really say, or inverted wing backs, just move into the midfield. Because there's already only one DM there, this says that they'll only tuck into the inside if there are less than two, which means if there's one DMs. But even when there's two in here, when he inverts, the other one will still go in because this is classed as a fullback, which means you end up like this, which just absolutely crams the midfield, gives you so many passing options, and makes it almost impossible for the opposition to press you, because in the match engine, the wingers won't really come in. The wingers won't really follow the fullbacks into midfield, so you'll always get a huge overload in the middle. And it also means that because they're not attacking or overlapping, if you do cock it up, and say Rodri loses the ball here, all they've got to do is just drop back there, and they're back in position to defend, like a normal fullback would be. Rodri's on deep lying playmaker, on defend. You could well have him on take more passing risks. If it was real life, I would probably have this kind of instruction on, but in FM I wouldn't. It doesn't matter if these things counteract their traits. I really wouldn't worry. But he'll kind of just roam around this kind of defensive midfield area. He will drop in between the centre backs to receive the ball. He will push up slightly more. Rodri is easily the best player in the world in this position, but you can get plenty of players who don't need to be as good as him, who can do an excellent job here. And you don't always need them to be an excellent defender because of how much you're going to keep the ball. You don't necessarily need the most physical and defensive midfield because you're going to have the ball for most of the game. But obviously, if your whole midfield is terrible at defending and has no physicality, you're going to get ripped apart in the counter-attack. So it's a good balance to make. But with Tijani Reinders and Rodri here in this example, you've got plenty of physicality, plenty of defensive ability. And then in front of him, you have a Mazzala on support, a Mazzala on attack. You could put these the other way around. It really doesn't matter. One's just going to get further forwards than the other and more frequently get into the box. For me, I've got that on Silva because he's worse at defending. Well, maybe not in FM, but in real life, he's a worse defender. So I want him further up the pitch than Reinders. Reinders can be slightly deeper. And so when this midfield kind of moves into play, you'll end up with Lewis and Aït-Nouri kind of going in there. Rodri will be either in the midfield there, or you'll end up dropping in like that. Just gives you the box midfield. Reinders and Silva will kind of tuck up to the advanced midfield, with Silva kind of playing on and around the edge of the box. Reinders kind of being in this channel here. And then the idea with Savinho and Grealish, which I forgot the instruction for them actually, is that they stay wide and they hug the width. So they stretch the opposition's defensive line and try and create space between the centre-backs. So either they go really wide and the full-back comes out to mark them, which leaves space in here in this channel for Silva, space for Foden, or the full-back ignores them and stays narrow to mark Silva, Reinders and Foden, which leaves a huge amount of space for the wingers, when technical players like Grealish, like Savinho, can exploit that. I do know Grealish has gone to Everton in real life, I'm just using him in this video as an example. And then finally, with the roles in the attack, like I just said, we have the two inverted wingers on either side. You don't want regular wingers because they try and cross from the byline, which means they're going to lose the ball trying to get to the byline. Inverted wingers don't, so they keep the ball slightly better. And then it's a false nine up top, which is a very weird role in FM. Sometimes it works brilliantly, sometimes it's awful, it's quite inconsistent, but so long as you've got enough runners around him and he's a good enough player, you'll probably be fine. So there are a couple of other things I wanted to point out, where if you're seeing that your wingers aren't getting a lot of space because their fullbacks are tucking in, they're coming very central to defend all of your central players, and they're leaving space out wide, you can use players like Jeremy Doku, change them to winger on attack, put them on their stronger side, and then they will, use all this space, get to the byline and cut it back in, because you've got work ball into box. They're not just going to be swinging in crosses from over here somewhere. They will get to the byline and cut it in for your false nine and your Mazzalas. But I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you can see in the highlights or in the statistics that they are leaving a lot of space down the flanks. or they've got a particularly weak fullback. If they've got a really slow fullback that you think you can attack, then you should be doing it. The other thing I thought I may as well point out, seeing as I have Haaland available, is stuff like this absolutely can work with an advanced forward like Haaland. You don't need a false nine, you don't need a deep line forward, you can have a huge lump up top that, you know, is best in his physical attributes. But the way you do that, in my opinion, is you have the two Mazzalas on support so they stay on the edge of the box. And you'd, for me personally, you'd play slower, more creative wingers like Foden, like Grealish, and you'd put one of them on support. And that way you've got more supporting players who want the ball to feed, who are all aiming to feed Haaland, rather than an attacking player who's trying to run in and attack the space. A support player is more likely to come in and ask for the ball to feed. At least that's the way I think of it. So I find that quite useful when you've got a player like Haaland who you really want to use, but you want to play a possession-based system. Because obviously you're not going to play Haaland as a false nine, are you? It'd be comical. And then the last thing I thought I'd show with this tactic is how you can use a player like Omar Marmoush. So when you have the false nine, you can have an inside forward on attack on one side, and then you could also tell Ait Nouri to get further forwards, which means if he sees a gap where Marmoush is here, he is more likely to run wide and go into it. But this just means there'll be another runner to add to the Mazzalas running into this channel, running in behind, which gives the false nine another passing option, it gives the Mazzalas another passing option, and it just creates more central problems for their defence to deal with. So you can kind of see the overall aim of this tactic is to create huge central overloads for the opposition, to make it really hard for them to deal with all these short passes in around the edge of their area. The way this tactic fails, particularly in FM, is players sometimes make really idiotic decisions in the match engine and struggle to keep the ball and give it away stupidly in attack, which leads to you facing a lot of counter attacks, probably more than you realistically should in a lot of cases. And as well as this is all technical players. Everyone knows physical attributes rule Football Manager, so having a team full of technical players which aren't particularly physical is not going to do as well as your typical gegenpressing side. But I think if you're playing Football Manager simply to use the most meta tactics and to win as much as you can, I think personally you're wasting your time. You should be trying to have fun building interesting tactics which you've created yourself, which you enjoy. I mean, who am I to tell you how you should play the game, but that's just my opinion. And now for the second tactic, we have taken charge of Antonio Conte's Napoli, and I have to say, I am absolutely loving the look of this tactic. It's a route one, it's a 5-2-1-2, and I have to say, just looking at this squad, I might have to do a Napoli save at the start of the next Football Manager. This is a brilliant squad, so fun. You've got an excellent backline, you've got exciting players like De Bruyne, McTominay, Football Manager legend Lorenzo Luca, you've got Lukaku up front, who is so good in Football Manager, so underrated. Exciting players like David Neres if you want to play with wingers. You've also got Noel Lang, you've got Politano somewhere, there he is. You've got wing backs who can play as fullbacks if you want to do that. You've got such a well-rounded squad. The only thing I can think of that you don't have is a absolute destroyer in defensive midfield, but you can always buy one. That's the whole point of the Football Manager. Lobotka as well is brilliant, but I haven't picked him for this, as I'll explain in a minute. But we'll go through the instructions first. We're going fairly narrow on the attacking width, just to keep this front three closer together, so the headers don't need to go as far. We're playing through the middle specifically again to hit this front three. We're passing into space so that hopefully the flick-ons go in behind. It does mean some of the pumps up from the back go in behind the defence, which isn't really what you want, but swings and roundabouts. We're hitting early crosses. You can float them. I hate floated crosses, but some people like them. You can do whatever you want with crosses, to be honest, but I like hitting them early. I hate shoot on sight. I won't have that on. We're going slightly more direct. Going much more direct is a little bit extreme, in my opinion. It's a bit crazy. So we're just going slightly more direct with a slightly higher tempo. We're not counter-pressing, but we're not regrouping, we're sitting neutral. We are counter-attacking and we're quickly distributing it to the target forward when the goalkeeper receives the ball. We're pressing high, we're more often press and we're getting stuck in. This is more for the FM match engine. If I was doing this kind of more true to life, I'd probably have a mid block with get stuck in and more often, but the high press is just nice to have, especially when you have forwards like Luka and Lukaku who can press, especially with McTominay. His work rate, his stamina, he's got 20 end out of 20 stamina. He's so good in the press. And I think these stats, if anything, slightly undervalue just how good he was for Napoli. In 155, current ability is excellent to be fair, but still, he was so good. And he looks like a perfect shadow striker. So for this one, we'll start with the roles from the top, just to switch it up. We've got Lukaku on complete forward on attack. As you can see by the attributes that get highlighted here, he kind of does a bit of everything. He dribbles, shoots, wins headers, plays passes, does a bit of everything, holds the ball up. His dribbling I don't really want him to do, but if you're playing him as a complete forward, you're going to have to tell him to dribble more. But we can live with that because he's so good. 20 balance, 20 strength, 16 jumping reach, 93 kg, excellent finisher, perfect penalty taker. He is just an excellent forward. Next to him is Lorenzo Luca, who is a lot more limited, really can't dribble at all, but he has 18 jumping reach, 16 strength, 17 heading, and is 6'7", and he has good traits like plays it back to goal. He's perfect to be a target forward, and he can finish, good finishing, mediocre first touch, can kind of pass, decent technique, not too slow. He's a decent forward other than that, but his aerial ability is what makes him particularly dangerous. Obviously behind them, like I was just mentioning, is Scott McTominay on a shadow striker. This is my favourite type of player in FM, full stop. I love a shadow striker, and I love one that's good in the air. And McTominay with 18 jumping reach, 15 heading, 16 strength, 17 aggression, can finish, can pass, great off the ball, great determination and work rate. He is a brilliant player in Football Manager, and I absolutely love this kind of player. A 10 that gets into the box, wins headers, presses hard. He's just my perfect player for this kind of role. Another player which can play well in FM in this role is Max Dowman. He is also excellent there, because in FM he's 6'2". I don't think he is in real life. And then in the pivot we have arguably the best midfielder of all time, arguably, not saying I think that, of Kevin De Bruyne. Roaming playmaker for him. Go wherever you want, mate. Do whatever you want. Doesn't really fit Route 1, but I don't care. It's Kevin De Bruyne. You have to make the exception and tell him to go wherever the hell he likes. You could have him on dribble more. I've not. Just to try and keep a bit more Route 1-esque. Next to him, you need an anchor. Like, anything other than a defensive midfielder on defend, an anchor or a half-back is suicidal. If you play a ball-winning midfielder, you are losing. Even if you're going on defend. Because let's say De Bruyne has roamed here, has lost the ball, and then someone over here has the ball. And Anguissa's going to close him down because that's what a ball-winning midfielder does. It goes sprinting off to win the ball. And you're just going to have an absolute chasm in your midfield. This is the current problem with Man United, with Bruno Fernandes doing this De Bruyne role. Obviously not as well as De Bruyne, but still he's a good player. And then you've got a guy next to him as the ball winner who just goes sprinting off, and Bruno goes roaming off, and there's no one in the midfield. So you need to have an anchor here. Again, it goes against his traits. Who gives one, really? Wing back on support on each side. Very obvious. I would tell him to cross deep, personally, because I just like putting early crosses into the box to this kind of front line. It's interesting to watch. And particularly with these two, they're not great dribblers, but they're excellent crossers at the ball, and they're both good defenders. And they're both reasonably tall as well, 6'4". I think Di Lorenzo's 6'2", just 6'4", but physically he's excellent. They're both good defenders, they both work hard. I very much like this kind of wing back in a system like this. You don't need them to be dribbling and taking players on. Just get up the pitch, receive a ball, touch, crossed into the box for the three huge lads up top. Perfect. The defence is the most basic back three you've ever seen. We've got Juan Jesus as the left-sided wide centre-back, 6'1", physically dominant, fast player, can actually play with the ball a little bit as well. but superb player. I'm not even going to try and say this. Alessandro Buongiorno, 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 no idea. Not as quick, hence why he's in the middle. 6'3", left-footed, great jumping reach, great in the air. So solid physical defender. Likewise for Armani, physical, good in the air, not great on the ball and a bit slow. He's definitely the weakest of the back three in terms of like ability. You could have one more ball playing centre back like this guy here with his 14 passing if you wanted to. Personally, I think that's a waste of time with this kind of tactic. The one thing I would do is, because wide centre backs do sometimes go on a little bit of a wander forwards, just make sure you tell them to cross left off less often. You don't want this guy putting in a cross. 10 technique, 8 crossing, 10 vision. You really just don't want him putting crosses into the box. Just let him play it to Di Lorenzo. And finally, a goalkeeper on defend. You can't be playing a tactic like this without a goalkeeper on defend. However, I wouldn't be playing Mere. He's a good shot stopper, but he can't kick a ball. So therefore, for that reason, I'll be playing Milinkovic Savic, who is perfect. Best attribute is his kicking. He's 6'8". He's absolutely massive, and he has no glaring weaknesses other than his positioning. But I don't really care. He's 6'8". He's gonna look sick in game. Just a very cool player, and in my opinion, a cool tactic all around. Like I was saying before, Napoli do have a lot of kind of exciting wingers. Because in real life, Conte played, or this season at least, played 2 number 10s, like this kind of idea, from what I remember at least. I didn't watch that much Napoli, but it was kind of like that, I would say. Obviously not with De Bruyne, because he's only just joined, but it would be Lobotka, wherever he's gone. That's the kind of tactic I would say they were playing with this season. So that's where you can use your players. Rather than having 2 10s, you could have 1 10, an inside forward. You could have an advanced playmaker on the side. You could have an inverted winger if you really want to, but I wouldn't. But if you really want to, you could. But there's uses for these kind of players. Or you could, again, doesn't really fit Route 1 very well, but you could invert a wing back. Tell one of your DMs to Segundo Volante, which is an excellent role for a tactic like this, which I was tempted to use, which means he'll go bombing on into this space, the wing back will tuck in, and the winger will get down the line. It works surprisingly well, and the Volante is an excellent thing to play because the midfielders struggle to pick him up. So Lukaku will drag the centre-backs out, he'll win a header, and the Volante will come storming through the space. None of their DMs will pick him up, and he'll walk into the box and blast one in. If you can finish, which Anguissa can't, but you could play McTominay there, for example. He'd be excellent there. Put a playmaker up here, a target man up here, like this. He goes flying through. Sure, we have no right-hand side because this wing needs to be a bit more attacking, but there you go. That would work as well. A lot more asymmetrical and unusual, but it gets you a winger, it gets you a Volante, which a lot of people like, it gets De Bruyne higher up the pitch and gives you 2 more defensively sound defensive midfielders, and it gets better use out of a right back if you've got a right back like, I think there's Spinazzola somewhere. Yeah, like if you've got someone like Spinazzola who does like to dribble and does really want to get forwards, there you go, that's how you get the best out of him, while also using some of your wingers, like your Lang, your Neres, your Politano. You can use a Raspadori out there. It's just a really fun tactic in my opinion, and I think it's underused because of how many people play gegenpressing and control possession-based systems, which is a shame.